Good morning. This is Tampa Home Talk. Welcome. We're glad you're here. And this week's show is going to be the predecessor from last week's show. And so the topic of today's show, last week you may remember, and if you missed Tampa Home Talk, you can catch the show on a podcast. But we talked about many of the things that we see in the field, including, Pat, what was your big takeaway from last week? Let me ask you that.
Well, there were many good things and good points, but you caught me off guard. I got to figure out which one I like the best. So continue, and then I'll just jump back in there.
Okay. So Leo was out last week, as you may remember.
Oh, that's the part I liked.
I figured that would be the part he liked the best.
So Leo was actually, you were in Belize, and we've been running around so crazy, I haven't had a chance to ask you how it was.
Yeah, I was actually down there looking for real estate for a client. There was a new subdivision that went up. It was built by a large chain hotel, and it was built by a big box builder. And they built like an entire subdivision in 4.5 months. Needless to say, the amount of defects I found was staggering.
You probably had so much fun there.
I did. It was funny. The sales guy was talking to me, and I was like, "You realize there's wood rot on these baseboards because you didn't actually finish the flashing for the door threshold. Water was just pouring into the units. It was just crazy."
Well, when you go to a different country, I would imagine that their building standards are not quite as they are here in the U.S.
Well, with other countries, what typically happens, instead of having one piece of heavy machinery and one driver for it, you typically have no heavy machinery and 50 people. So it's more manual labor. But it was just, this subdivision was just so poorly built. And I see the same thing here in Tampa. It's like builders will say, we can't get these subdivisions up fast enough for our clients. You do it too fast, you sacrifice all the quality.
I wouldn't quite compare it to that. Would you now?
Definitely. I mean, the sad part is if what I looked at in Belize was actually here in the United States, I would already be petitioning the homeowners for a construction defect lawsuit against the builder.
Wow.
That's how bad it was. And I see it all the time. I mean, you have a metal roof that's starting to pit and rust. It's been hammered incorrectly. It's got a bunch of divots in it. You had wall flashings. Water was just pouring in. It was ridiculous. And the salespeople are like, "Oh, I didn't know that." I'm like, I just asked him, "Do you have a construction manager?" He's like, "Yeah." "Does your construction manager actually look at the crew?" He's like, "No." I'm like, no one knows what's going on. You got to watch your people.
Well, the crazy part too is when people buy real estate in other countries, it's not like it is here, right? Where we truly have zero down payment programs. Some of them even without PMI. Veterans can buy with absolutely no money down. FHA 3.5% conventional. We see a lot of these nurse, firefighter, teacher programs, right, that are literally no money down, no PMI. So we have some amazing products like that we see, and this stuff simply does not exist in other countries. They have to put significant amounts down.
No, they have to put like 10 to 20,000 down in escrow, which is non-refundable no matter what.
Right.
They have to put another 30 to 40% down at closing, and then they get 10% interest. And that's the hard money route. So most people just pay cash. I wish I could be one of those people. Like I said, I was down there on behalf of some clients who ended up backing out of the deal and buying at a different subdivision that we found that was properly built and a little bit older.
So how cool is that? Leo got to actually fly to Belize to check out a property for his clients. Amazing. So this.
Yeah, you know what? Wait.
Go ahead.
Let's find out. Did you get to do any fun stuff? Did you do any fishing in Belize?
It was lobster season. So my wife and I had lobster ceviche, lobster gaucho, which apparently is baked. And then we had lobster broiled with butter. We had lobster like 60 ways.
Yeah,
now,
lobster, and more lobster.
I'm a big fan of conch, which was not in season. So my wife was really happy. And I was just sitting there drinking Bellicans the whole time.
Did you bring any of that lobster back for your two buddies that do the show for you when you're away?
Good question, Pat. I love it.
You do know on the customs declaration form, you have to declare if you're bringing any livestock, seafood, any food in.
Ping right back at you, Pat.
Yeah, I can't actually smuggle food in. But next time I go down there, maybe I can find out, like, we're going to do a radio show down there and have us all down there and do a remotely.
You know, it's not hard with the equipment you have now. You can do it anywhere in the world.
So, Pat, do you think, like, if we were on a cruise ship, that internet would actually sustain a connection for a live show?
Oh, no, it would.
Really?
Oh, it definitely would, as long as you have the internet, yeah.
Yes, I'm exactly thinking about November.
Without a doubt, you could do it.
Oh, that would be awesome. We're live and remote from the Lido deck of a Carnival cruise ship.
That would be something.
Did I just hear you invite him, the guy that didn't bring us lobster?
I did. Leo, I think Leo off air, a little bit liquored up, might be even more fun. Don't you think, Pat?
He's not every morning when he comes in and does this show.
Oh, I'm
now.
pretty liquored up. I'm still liquored up from the night before. I have my Thursday night wine tastings I go to religiously.
Hey, aren't you
Oh,
guys
man.
on Facebook this morning?
We are on Facebook Live, yes. Can you see us? I need to invite some people, Pat. You might have to do that. And, it's a little off angle, but it's better than the studio, really, in Beasley. So,
No,
the angle.
I like the angle there, but what I'm loving today is this is our second video that's going to go live on the video stream, and we've got the camera angle perfect right now. So I'm very happy with what's going to be the post-show video production,
Yes.
which we will put a link up on TampaHometalk.com. And get that, or actually, what if they can't find it? They need to call us on the off-air studio line.
It's 813-377-2775. And they can call or text 813-377-2775. We'll get you right over that link to the whole show. So we've had a lot of fun, always as every morning, but the topic of this show really is spot on with what Leo just did in Belize. And so many, many times the questions that we get, Leo, is people think, oh, I'm buying a brand new home. I have a warranty with the builder, 10-year structural. What do I need a home inspection for? You're not going to find anything on a new construction home, really, are you? And then the builder's going to fix anything that we see.
I mean, sadly, with the subdivision I just described down in Belize or these other big box builders, I mean, I just drove by one on 56. That's wood frame going up really fast on the way into the studio here. By the time we're there for that final inspection, it's usually too late. On new construction, we usually recommend 4 or 5 inspections at key moments before they start covering stuff up to find these defects and have them addressed along the way.
So let me jump in. So when Leo says covering stuff up, it's not even necessarily intentionally, but once they put up drywall and that sort of stuff, you just can't see behind the walls.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be uncommon on commercial builds 20 years ago. There would be beer bottles, soda cans just
Buried.
inside the walls.
Yep.
Yeah, they're just drinking, eating their lunch. They put it in the wall, and the drywall people come by and just drywall over it. The worst case scenario we had was actually a dead rat in the wall, made a whole room stink. They had just covered it up, and it was starting to decompose in the wall. And then for 6 months after closing, the clients couldn't find it. We used our thermal camera and found a decayed rat inside the wall, which was one of my best thermal photos ever.
Oh, I bet it was. We'll have to post that on Tampa Home Talk. So let's go back to this, what you're talking about. And people say, oh, I'm buying a brand new home. I don't really need an inspection. Let's debunk that myth and talk about when are the best times, right? And there might be somebody listening to Tampa Home Talk right now that's under contract to buy a new build, and so they may be somewhere along the way, but they're still, the next best time, right, is now. But if someone's thinking about building, where do you suggest they start if they have not yet poured the slab, they're in the permitting stage and they're waiting to start construction? Where would you suggest someone starts?
I suggest we usually do 4 or 5 inspections through the course of a construction, and I recommend that the first inspection is before they pour that slab. We want to see the troughs for the footers. We want to see.
So explain that visually. What does that look like?
So basically, there's going to be a trench. Looks like something out of World War I. There's going to be a trench. There's going to be rebar in there instead of barbed wire. We want to make sure the rebar isn't touching the sidewalls. We want to make sure that it's elevated off the ground. That's your footer. That's your basic foundation. Then they're going to put some kind of plastic down.
Now, before you jump to the next thing, what are some of the things you're looking at with that footer and the rebar? Is there anything specific you're looking for?
Yeah, the rebar needs to be the correct size. It needs to be tied. It needs to be not touching the sidewalls. It needs to be elevated off the ground using something called a chair. It needs to be in the right place.
Certain distance from each other, right?
And
a certain
then
number.
It has to have other vertical components sticking up, which will become part of the stem wall or the basic block foundation.
And so what are some of the common defects you see? So as we're talking along and you're discussing what you're looking for at certain key times, what's one thing you would see that would be a defect that someone may never notice at this particular stage of construction?
Well, what we normally see is trench collapse. This is the rainy season. We had one that they were going to pour the slab right the day after Hurricane Hermine. The trenches had collapsed completely. They poured the trench. They'd actually poured the concrete the day after. That whole pad had been compromised, and the buyer walked away. Turns out 9 months later, we actually inspected the house for a different buyer, and I knew where all the structural damage already was, and it was already starting to show.
Oh my. So we'll have to talk about what some of those things that you saw that was already starting to show up in a brand new home is, and then we'll talk about the next phases of construction that are the best time to get inspected during the process of buying a new home. Thanks for listening this morning here to Tampa Home Talk on Money Talk 1010. Thanks for watching on Facebook Live. We will be back in just a moment. Welcome back. This is Tampa Home Talk, and if you're listening, we have a lot of fun, but if you're watching, it's probably even more fun.
Yeah, I'm going to say for the Facebook Live people, please download our video after the show.
Yes, it will be way better than what you're watching now, I can promise.
Whoa, what's going on this? Oh, I'm getting dizzy. Whoa, the camera's going everywhere.
We're moving everything.
But for the sake of the listening audience, so with the slab inspection, the other thing we're looking at is making sure that plastic that's down, and that plastic's going to prevent the water from coming into and destroying your flooring after the construction's built. We want to make sure the plastic's down, it's taped correctly, and it goes all the way to the trench. And you'll be amazed how many times that gets ripped, and then they have moisture intrusion after the house is finished, and flooring starts popping up, or wood flooring starts rotting out.
So this is where you start seeing stuff in the corners of properties and that sort of stuff. It's because that moisture barrier was not laid properly?
Right, and I mean, that's all from even before they've poured the first slab down. You've already got permanent damage to the home 6, 9, 12 months after it's built. It's just, it's that important to get those first couple of inspections.
So can you tell if that was done correctly once that slab is done and the house starts going up? Can you tell that at the early stage of construction?
At the earlier stage of construction, no. If we don't see it before they pour the slab, you're not going to see it till like a year or two down the road.
Oh my!
And that's why we call them inspections before things are covered up. That leads me into the next inspection, which we call a framing inspection, and that's before they put the drywall up, which is going to cover up the actual wood that's inside the house, where your door thresholds are, your lintels, your rough end, which is what just the pipes for the plumbing and the electrical. We check to make sure all that's in the right place. The roofing underlayment was put on correctly. All different areas where builders can just mistake. The biggest mistake we see there is sometimes they put the trusses on backwards.
We've been doing this show for a while because you already knew what I was going to ask you next. So if the truss is on backwards, what does that look like?
Well,
what does that mean if it's on backwards?
To the common eye, it might not look like anything's wrong, but a truss is going to be a bunch of triangles put together in a way that distributes the weight of the roof onto the concrete walls. And if the trusses are on backwards, it's distributing the weight in the wrong direction. So what might actually happen is you'll have a whole bunch of what could be end wall weight that should be on a nice solid 30, 40 foot long wall. It might actually be on an interior load-bearing wall. It might be on the staircase. So it might not be actually set for that weight, and then the roof starts to cave in.
And that would happen roughly how long after the home's been built and you get a CO or certificate of occupancy?
That one can take 3 to 5 years to develop.
And that's something that even the county, right, wouldn't see. It would get...
County's not typically doing that. I mean, a good inspector will catch that, but the county, you have to think, the county's got 30 or 40 houses to look at a day. They're out in your property for 10 to 15 minutes at most. Usually it's like 5 to 10 minutes. And then for these big box subdivisions, the builder will hire an engineer who works in the office with that builder, and then they just sign off on stuff. So the county never shows up.
So the talking about the trusses, like being on backwards, so the trusses are supposed to go like this, right?
Well, they still go like this.
They're like this, or like what is backwards?
Backwards just means that the triangle, like it's still going to look like a triangle with the triangles up in the air, but there's little triangles inside the big triangles, or the cross members, or webs as we call them. When the truss is just installed backwards, it's just flipped. Kind of like with the Facebook Live right now, if you're watching this, you can see the time in the background is actually reversed.
Because it's the front camera. Makes sense.
And that's what the trusses going backwards would look like.
And good analogy there, Pat says the clock is backwards, not the trusses. Yes, something like that. All right, so if you're just now rolling in listening to Tampa Home Talk, we're here with Leo Cannyn. He's talking all about the things to look for when you're building a new construction home, why you actually need a home inspection if you are building a new home, because many people think, oh, I don't need an inspection. And many times what we see, too, is so many builders start the process, and then they're able to sell it before they're finished building. And so it, that significantly impacts them not having to build from the ground up. So they're very profitable when they can start building a spec home and then sell it towards the end. And they price it usually to move, but you would miss out on those opportunities if you didn't yet own that home or have it chosen.
Right.
So the next inspection that you would do would be like, what's the next major one?
We call them mechanical inspections. It's basically at some point after the drywall's been put up, they're starting to do some of the electrical finishes. The HVAC units are in. We can take a look at more of the grading and the drainage around the house. The roof covering should be on. We can start to look and see if they have the outlets in the right places. I don't know how many times I've seen it where people thought they had a TV mount that was 6 feet in the air and it's 10 feet in the air or 4 feet in the air. It's stuff like that. You start to catch where they're starting to deviate. One of the weirdest ones we had was that new style of flooring, the tile that looks like wood.
Yeah.
They're like planks.
Right.
The weirdest one we had is the planks were laid in the wrong direction. So they thought they were getting it so it would be perpendicular. So when you walk in the house, you would be walking over plank, plank, plank.
Mm-hmm.
They installed it
going
parallel.
straight down.
So when you could walk on one plank through the whole house, and it just didn't look right. It made the whole house look a lot smaller than it should have because it gave it a shotgun approach.
I bet.
Yeah, so the client
So
was...
did they rip all that out and redo it?
We made them rip it all out and redo it because the client was very unhappy, and we explained to the client, these are the repercussions of your builder not following the building plans, putting the tile in wrong. Your house is going to look smaller. It's going to be weird, and it's just not going to have that big full feeling you're going for. So get them to tear it out now before they put the baseboards in, before they paint.
How do you think that happens? People are just rushed. They're short-staffed. They hire... how do you think that happens?
Well, I know exactly how it happens. I worked for a builder in the early 2000s. I'm not going to mention the builder's name, but it was down in Lee County, Florida. Their goal was to put a house up in about 47 days. The way they did it was they built an assembly line. Each crew had one task. When they completed that one task, roofing underlayment, tile laying. When they completed that one task, they were done for the day, and then they come back the next day and move on to the next house. It leaves no room for a crew being sick and with no supervision. If the crew gets paid $200 a day, whether it takes them 4 hours, 6 hours, or 12 hours, they're going to try and get it done in 4 hours.
Right.
Huge quality problems with that.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. And so I thought you said 5 inspections. There's 3 major ones during construction?
Well, this is the third one. The next one we would do is like a punch list inspection.
Okay.
That's a fun one. We get to walk around with the blue tape and point out all the mistakes.
And that's one most people are familiar with when they buy new construction, because the builder will always do that with you and give you the opportunity
to
walk through.
And then the sad part about that is if you hire a residential home inspection, for a residential home inspector to come out and expecting a punch list inspection, that's not what you're going to get. The defects, a lot of times the defects found during this inspection are cosmetic, which aren't required to be reported by home inspection standards. So it's important, if you're not hiring us and you're going through a home inspection firm, make sure you tell them, I want a punch list inspection. I want you to walk around with the blue tape. I want you to put it on all the cosmetic defects. Otherwise, they're going to be looking for what we would call major defects. And they're just not going to find they're probably not going to find the level we would find anyway. But even on that, it's going to be harder to find major defects on a brand new looking home. You got to start with the cosmetic defects to find the major defects, because the cosmetic defects are going to be your clue that something's wrong.
Yeah. And it's so that if you are tuning in from last week, basically what we were talking about is, how and why it would matter to have an agent like me to help you through the new construction process. And I will tell you, just being around for a long time, Leo, with you and some of your inspectors, we've seen a lot of things in the field. By no means are we inspectors, but we probably are going to catch more, I would say, than the average agent. And so many times when we're doing this walkthrough with the builders, and they're doing their punch list with the blue tape on things they find that are wrong, you'd be surprised the number of times that the builders get irritated that we are there with the client punching every little thing that we see.
Oh yeah, they definitely get irritated because they get paid on the house closing. They rework anytime any blue tape is rework. They have to bring a trade in from maybe they're 4 or 5 houses down. Maybe they were a specialty trade and they're just not there anymore. So it costs them money and time that they could be using building something else. So they really hate it. They really hate it when an engineer comes in and does it, because we'll find things even more so.
Yeah, I bet.
And then the other thing you have to be thinking about too is when we're in there, and the punch list inspection needs to happen after the city and county has given you what's called a certificate of occupancy. That means the city and county are done with their inspections.
That almost never happens. They're always doing those pre-punches before CO.
Right. No, you got to do it after because you want to catch it after the city and county have signed off on it or after their engineer has signed off on it. And they're trying to pawn off onto you what they would consider a finished product. And a lot of times when we're going through and punching out a house, we're the first people to turn faucets on and off. A lot of times the hot and cold are reversed or drains aren't hooked up properly. We're the first people to punch, to plug electrical testers into the outlets. Sometimes they're wired wrong.
And let's face it, you want to find that out now before you move in, as opposed to, dealing with this irritating defect, like the hot and the cold being reversed. I mean, that's just, I would see a lot of people eventually just say, oh, we're going to go with the flow. Or, people get busy and it's just one more thing. It's like that light bulb that you never get to, right? That you want to change, but it's just inconvenient, or the place, or it's a certain type of bulb and you don't have that exact one, that sort of thing.
Oh, that reminds me. I need an A4 bulb for my desk lamp that sits next to my bed. I have needed it for 9 months. I just never buy it.
Yeah. So our off-air number, in case you're listening to the show and you want to catch up with myself or Leo, is 813-377-2775. If you're building a home or thinking about building a home and you would like Leo to do these inspections with you, and trust me, it is well worth the money, call us or text us Leo at 813-377-2775. This is Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell. Leo, Cannyn, and I will be back in just a minute. Welcome back. This is Tampa Home Talk. Thanks for sticking with us during the break. And if you're just now tuning in to Tampa Home Talk, we're talking all about today new construction and that common misnomer. We're debunking that myth that people think that they do not need an inspection on a new construction home because of the builder's warranty. And we, in fact, just talked a lot about why you do. And Leo, what's the next one that you would recommend? Is there another inspection, or after CO, that's your final one?
Well, after the punch list inspection, a lot of times clients who are very happy with our services and everything we found want us to come back and make sure that the builder actually did the fixes. Sometimes
final reinspection.
Yes, final reinspection is typically where we're at. Now, you have to be careful about these builder warranties. A lot of times they will allow a certain number of a type of repairs, like for instance, my tile story from they didn't pour the slab correctly. They will come in and replace a section of bad popped tile once. So if you do it too early in the process, after the punch list, after you've accepted the house, they come out and they fix 3 or 4 tiles, and then 6 months later, a whole room worth of tile pops up. The builder's not going to fix that. It's no longer a warranty item. So you have to be really careful about the builder's warranty because like the warranty's there to protect the builder. Mm-hmm. It's to make you feel comfortable with the purchase, but it's really there to protect the builder. And a lot of times, builders will fight people on warranty issues, and that's when we get involved in what's called the construction defect lawsuit, when we point back these cosmetic concerns are really house building concerns and code violations, and that's when we tie it back all together, and they start suing the builder.
And I've noticed, too, that not many, but there's been a few of these builders I've noticed lately when we look in their contract, they're actually outsourcing the warranty after the sale.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, they don't want to bring the new construction versus remodeling construction or rehab construction. They're 2 different markets. They're 2 different contractors, different margins, different everything. So the builders don't want to take their new construction people into an active home and have them handle these warranty concerns. They'd rather have the remodeling contractors in there.
Right. So out of everything we've talked about, which inspection would you say is the most crucial? And just to recap, if someone's just now hopping in the car listening, we talked about that pre-slab inspection.
Well, they're all very important for different reasons. I would say if you're only going to do one inspection, well, it's probably going to be at the end. It's probably going to be that post-punch list inspection. But I mean, they're all so important. I guess if I have to pick my favorite, it would be the framing. We can probably catch the most wrong with the house that gets covered up at that point in time.
Yeah, and that would make sense to me because your slab is there. You can see stuff. There's not yet any drywall up.
We can see the blocks. We can see the mortar. And the other thing I like about the framing inspection, if you catch things at the framing inspection level, the builder is really apt to fix things because it's like, hey, builder, we found this before you put the drywall up. We can actually find it after the drywall's up, and now you got to tear drywall out to get to it. So take care of it now. So the framing inspection is one the builders are actually least scared of us at, because we actually are doing their job for them, as they say.
Well, it would make sense, and then they can get that stuff fixed. And I would think if they know that this particular client has hired an inspector like you at Beryl Engineering Inspections, that they are going to be a little bit more thorough, right, with that particular build, because they know you're coming back, you're going to be looking for stuff, don't you think?
No, sometimes they quote unquote, we like having them because they do our job for us. They do less supervision because they're going to expect us to catch everything at these moments. So it is.
That's interesting. That's like the total opposite that I would think it would be. What about you, Pat?
I would think the same.
As me?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I know, but I've just heard it from too many builders that have said we like having third-party inspectors because they can do our job for us, and it just makes me cringe because, again, we're out there for an hour.
I'm not the GC.
We're out there for an hour and a half to 2 hours once every 6 weeks. When I hear that, I'm like, you should have someone on this property once a day, minimum, for 15 to 30 minutes. That's I say minimum, and if they think they can replace that with us being out there once every 6 weeks, I just cringe.
Definitely.
I got a problem that happened yesterday. I want to remind you. Maybe you check on something like this, but I had my garbage disposal. It was leaking, but I didn't know it. And it would only leak when I turned it on. So, like when you check the plumbing in a house and you let the water run down the garbage disposal, do you turn that on at the same time?
Yeah, what we typically do with a garbage disposal, if there's a working fridge with freezer, we'll throw ice in there too. But we let the faucets run for about 2 to 3 minutes per drain.
Why are you putting ice in there?
In the garbage disposal?
Yes.
I want to make sure that it's crunching.
Yeah, chop it up.
Yeah,
That's a good idea. See, he's thorough. I didn't expect him to check that, but that's
yeah,
good.
no, we leave the
That's
water
what
on.
happens when you let an engineer loose in your property to do a home inspection.
True. Or I just come over and make tea or coffee. It's just as bad. My friends still won't let me go visit their house. Anyway, so we turn the water on for 2 to 3 minutes per drain. We turn it on hot because if you get that nice warm water going through those drains, if there's going to be a leak, it's going to show itself. Garbage disposals, I love throwing ice down a garbage disposal. My favorite thing to throw down a garbage disposal is half a lemon because it disinfects and it cleans and it makes it smell better. But if I'm doing an inspection, there's usually not lemons handy, so I'll throw ice down there.
Well, I thought you were carrying lemons around for your inspection.
Could you imagine if this guy came to my house?
Well, Pat, it's funny that you say that because I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, I don't think Leo is ever allowed at my house, ever.
Yeah, my wife would love for him to come and be the big critic, and I'd have to fix everything. She'd love to have him there.
Although you should have my wife, who thinks she's an interior decorator, come with me so I can point out all the defects, and she can talk about how you can rearrange the whole room to make it look even better after you fix the defects.
And let me ask you this about toilets. You flush the toilet and it works. I mean, it flushes down okay. But the thing that I found is that if you put a new toilet in, it flushes pretty strong. Then after about 2 years, it starts getting weaker and weaker. What causes that?
The flapper valve is starting to wear. I mean, for
No,
toilets.
I don't think so. It's the same thing that happened to my artery. I think it's calcium buildup in the water, just like in the hot water heaters.
Oh, yeah, that would happen.
Yeah, I
you'd
think
have
the calcium in
buildup.
those holes are not allowing as much water to come out.
Yeah, but with toilets, we're actually looking for something else. And we found this yesterday on a $2 million home. The toilets weren't sealed to the ground properly. They didn't actually put grout around them so they could move. So anytime that toilet's moving, that seal breaks and sewage starts seeping out. I know I talked about this on the show before, how the sewage seeps out around the base of the toilet. That builder was not happy with us. He couldn't get a warranty through a third-party company until he actually rerouted the toilets. But I'm like, I just explained to him, if you don't grout the toilet and it shifts just a little bit, you're letting sewage out every single time someone sits on the toilet.
Oh.
Yeah. And that was a $2 million home, brand new.
So, talking about some of these defects, I know you've got some stories because you've been doing this for a long time. So, give me some stories. Give me some good examples of things that you caught that was like wild. Like, nobody would expect that when you go do an inspection, but yet you found it, and now the builder has to cure this defect.
Well, a couple of times we found it. Sometimes you got these two-story homes, these 3932 Carrera-style homes, to tie back to our remote. And I'm saying style because they didn't have this defect, but sometimes you have both your air handlers on the second floor, in a utility closet, which is about the size of a bedroom in these houses. And sometimes they put the wiring to the wrong unit. So you might have a 3-ton unit for the first floor and a 4-ton unit for the second floor, or vice versa, and they have the wiring switched. So what ends up happening in that situation is when you start running the larger unit on the smaller breaker, it starts tripping.
And that's kind of a big deal because
You need to dehumidify your home through running the
Right.
AC.
And then plus if you have a smaller unit trying to cool a bigger area that wasn't really meant to.
Well, that's a different defect. That's if they switch the ducting. I'm talking about switching the electrical.
Oh.
But switching the ducting can be just as bad. You have they installed the smaller unit where they should have put the larger unit. So now the smaller unit can't keep up, and the larger unit it's called short cycling, where it just functions so well it turns off, and then you're not really dehumidifying the home.
You know, I think one day, Pat, we are going to literally go to a home inspection in the field and do the show and follow Leo around and maybe a couple of your inspectors and just talk about some of these defects that you're finding, and we'll Facebook Live it.
Yeah,
That'd
you can
be
do that
awesome.
as far as, just get yourself about 100 foot of microphone cord and walk through the entire house.
Yeah, just walk around. Do they make these in wireless?
Oh, Bluetooth.
I think they do.
Yeah, but you get latency issues. I actually looked into all of that when I was trying to find the best video camera.
Of course you did.
So you end up with 15 to 45 milliseconds of latency, which actually on a live radio, Pat would be like off sync with us, and he would tell the jokes, and before we could even respond, he'd be on his next joke.
Well, I tell them now when you don't respond.
No, there's not that kind of delay.
I didn't respond to what he said.
Oh, you don't laugh.
Well, that's another whole story in itself.
Now, where is all of the other people in your office? I mean, your office doesn't look too busy. I mean, you have just you two there. Can't you call in some of your friends?
I was wondering, and I thought, normally Erica gets here early, but she wasn't even here this morning. I was here early trying to move stuff around and get everything a little more shapely organized in here, and I don't know where they are. They might have that flu bug going around.
I think they just know we're recording live. The on-air is going, and they don't want to be anywhere near the camera.
Why don't you tell everybody where you are located?
So our office is right here in Lutz because we're on the south side of 54, and we're at 23526 State Road 54. We're right at Livingston and 54, and we are doing our show live here, through the Beasley Media Network, but not in St. Pete, which is where you guys are located. So we are actually here in the Lutz office, and we're going to have some fun with this, I'm sure, in the future, and do some more remote broadcasts from other locations like we did for that broker open.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'd love to actually, some of our newer sponsors, Swenson Construction, what's the law firm we're having for the hurricane?
Oh, which brings me to next week.
Yeah, would love to do a remote from their new office.
Oh, really now? Okay,
Yeah.
perhaps we'll have to do that. So next week's show, which is not a big deal, right? Because we're not in South Carolina right now. But next week, I don't know, it might be. So the topic for next week's show, just so you know, is all about hurricane preparation. And it's going to be some, not just, the batteries, the flashlights, all that sort of stuff. We'll probably throw a little bit of construction stuff in there and then some so that you know what to expect. And, the cool thing about them, and we'll have them on the show in the future, but many times they fight insurance companies for claims and defects that they should be paying after a storm that they don't.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on, I can't tell you how many files. We're working on several files for them right now where the insurance company just, they don't want to pay what they should pay. They don't want to pay for entire re-roofs when they need to. They don't want to pay for window replacement when they need to. Insurance companies don't want to pay. And now that we're looking at Florence just hitting the South Carolina, North Carolina, insurance money is leaving this state, so there's going to be even more resistance to paying.
And they're actually not used to that, right? Like that area, they don't get a lot of storms.
Yeah, but when they get them, they're usually big ones.
Like they're probably hit with this, last night and still this morning yet. All right, so you're listening to Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell, here in the studio with Leo Cannyn, and our off-air number is 813-377-2775. You can call or text 813-377-2775. And when we come back after the break, we're going to talk about some of the properties we have and some of the properties we have coming up. And if you got a question for us, our call-in studio lines are 888-404-1010. If you're listening, you got a question with regards to construction defects, Leo's in the studio. We'll answer it. 888-404-1010.